This is our Teacher 4.0 Rubric training, specifically the training module for the planning domain. And as promised, this is our flip faculty meeting, so we can take care of this without having to meet together. The first thing I wanted to do was just review a little bit to make sure we were all on the same page when it comes to the Teacher 4.0 rubric that will be implemented next year for everyone. There are those 4 domains listed, and if you'll remember, we have covered the professionalism and the environment domains. Of course, we're covering the planning domain now, and we still have that big domain there, instruction, still to come. Just as a reminder as well, just to understand the structure of the rubric is important. And so we talked about the 4 domains that we just learned about on our previous screen here: instruction, planning, environment, and professionalism. There are also indicators for each domain listed along the side that you see there circled in green. There are descriptors for each of the indicators and underneath each of the performance levels that are very specific as to what we're looking for. And then, of course, everyone wants to know the performance levels. So we're on a 1 through 4 system of evaluation, 3 being proficient, 4 being exemplary. And as we talked about, and as we'll say again, we live hopefully in the proficient area when we talk about teacher evaluation. A couple of things in the planning domain just to remember. First of all, as I just mentioned, we do expect that we are in the proficient area in terms of our performance level. 4s are great, and exemplary is wonderful, and certainly we'll earn some of those, but proficient is what we're wanting and where we want to be. There are 3 specific indicators within and underneath the domain of planning, and those are instructional plans, student work, and assessment. And we'll look at those individually in just a moment. When looking at the old adept that we're used to, this all would be taken from domain 1, which was planning, and specifically the performance standards 1 through 3, if you're interested in how that kind of connects to the old adept system that we've used. So let's take a closer look at the indicators. We start with instructional plans, and I'm just going to start here. It's a good idea to kind of start here at the 3, at the proficient, and just go through these quickly. So do your instructional plans include goals that are aligned to state content standards, activities, materials, and assessments that are aligned to state standards? They're sequenced from basic to complex. They build on prior student knowledge. They provide appropriate time for student work and lesson and unit closure. Is there evidence that it's age appropriate? Is it appropriate for their knowledge and the interest of most of the learners in your classroom? And then finally, is there evidence that the plan in place provides opportunities for accommodation? So are you accommodating the needs of individual students? And so there's your 3. That's our goal. And again, it's important to really look at the specific words and verbiage that separate, for instance, a 3 from a 4. And sometimes that can be very difficult to obtain in just an individual lesson that's being observed. For instance, in this particular indicator within instructional plans, a 2, which is a needs improvement, you'll see the word some here. Some goals are aligned to state content standards, where it's just understood that in the proficient area that all goals are aligned to state content standards. And then taking that a step further, if you're exemplary in your performance standard and measure, then its measurable and explicit goals are aligned to state content standards. And so if someone's coming in to observe you and this is your evaluation, that's really what that observer, that evaluator would be looking for is, do they just see some of the goals aligned to state content standards, or all of them aligned, or does it go even further and all of the goals are measurable and explicit. And so I would encourage you, as you read through these, to take a look at that very specific wording among the different performance categories there. The next indicator is student work. And again, we'll start here with the proficient expectation, which is assignments require students to interpret and analyze information rather than just reproduce it. So there's a higher level thinking there, an application. It requires students to draw conclusions and support them through writing. And I know with what we've done with our TDA, for instance, that certainly writing plays a big part in student work. And then does the assignment require students to connect what they are learning to prior learning and some life experiences? I think about real world learning. I think about specifically for our building, a lot of what we've done with problem-based learning certainly fits there. And then again, you would just take a look at the other categories here from 1 all the way to 4. And then I'm just going to, for instance, let's go over here and look at the 4, the exemplary category. And you can see it says, these assignments require students to organize, interpret, analyze, synthesize, evaluate. We're getting higher up on the ladder in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, where they're going deeper, they're going further. And that's what we would look for as an evaluator coming in to observe a lesson if we were to score a teacher a 4 in this particular area. All right, let's move on to our last indicator within the planning domain, and that's assessment. And this is a big one for us, I believe, in looking at our assessments. So if you look at the proficient area, then you're looking for assessment plans that are aligned, again, to state standards. They are clear and measurable. It has students performing in more than 2 ways. So more than 2 ways would be something to really pay attention there. It's not just paper, pencil. It's a project. It's an experiment. It's a presentation. It's an essay. It's a short answer. There needs to be more than just 2 ways. And that's going to be something that an evaluator, again, would be looking for. Are there written tasks? That's very important. Are there performance checks throughout the school year? Again, understanding that with assessment, it's not just summative paper and pencil. Technology can be included. Again, a lot of what we've done with problem-based learning, rubric type assessments, those are all important and fit here. And then again, you can just notice some of the verbiage that's different as you transition from a 3 to a 4. Consistently align with state standards. So that's important. Clear and appropriate measurement criteria. More than 3 ways that we measure student performance versus just 2 ways. So again, notice those subtleties that certainly will make a difference as an evaluator is looking at an observation, observing, and trying to determine what score to give a teacher. I also wanted to mention this because you'll see this. This is actually dropped in our Google Drive folder, but these are just like a description of some of the qualifying measures. And I like this because I think it just makes sense. And this is just good teaching and good practice. If you're a 1 in many of these categories and overall, there's just teacher direction. There's very minimal evidence that students are showing ownership of learning. And then as you progress toward proficiency, then you're moving towards student-centered learning and student ownership until you do arrive at proficiency, which is there is evidence of student-centered learning and student ownership, and the teacher is just the facilitator at this point in time. And so that's that. I can remember Miss Harrison talking about, are you the sage on the stage or the guide on the side? And so are you facilitating learning and giving that responsibility and ownership for learning over to the student gradually in a logical sequence and manner and with support, but ultimately are students involved and very responsible for the learning that takes place in the classroom. And that's just a good way to summarize it, I think. The last thing that we'll do here is just have a few reflection questions for you to consider as an individual teacher, as a grade level. I'll tell you right now that Ms. Tollison and I both want to spend time next year. One of our key focus areas will be professional learning communities, planning the right way, planning effectively and efficiently, looking at assessments. And so here are a few reflection questions to consider. Do you plan with the end in mind? In other words, do you consider what students need to know and be able to do by a given point in time? Do you plan using grade level content standards and any support documents that may be available? That should be out and available anytime you get together as a team to plan. Do you plan to provide students with support, accommodations, and scaffolding? Do you consider the individual needs of students as a basic way to consider that? You can still provide rigor. You can still provide assignments that are, rigorous, that meet their needs by offering scaffolding and support. Do you include opportunities for students to produce work at higher levels of blooms? And then that word rigor always pops up, and that's a great thing for us to discuss and to learn more about together as we move forward. Do students show what they learn through writing? So is there a writing piece to this? With TDA, certainly there is, but writing throughout the content areas is very important. Our assessments align with content standards. We've heard standards mentioned a lot. Our assessments directly aligned with those. And then ultimately, do you use a variety of assessments to measure student performance? Is there a lot of formative assessment going on? Is it just summative? Are they producing work at higher levels? Are they presenting? Is it just the traditional paper and pencil? Those are just things to consider, and certainly an area, again, within planning and assessment that I think we really need to take a close look at together. All right, thanks for your time and attention as we've gone through our Teacher 4.0 Rubric training and taking a very close look at the planning domain. Thank you.